The war is over, but Nuremberg does not feel like peace. Every morning the sun rises over a city still carrying the weight of rubble, ash, and guilt. The grand stone walls of the Justizpalast courthouse rise above a landscape of shattered buildings, as if the one surviving monument in a dead city. Its windows reflect a world trying to convince itself that justice is possible after so much destruction. Inside, the air smells of ink, cigarettes, wet wool coats, and something older, an unease that never fully leaves the building. Guards stand stiffly at their posts. Translators cross the halls with stacks of documents. Lawyers mutter to themselves while revising arguments. Secrets move silently between rooms, carried by the people who know too much and the people who know too little. In the middle of all this, unnoticed by nearly everyone, walks Jakob Köhler. He is 60, though the war makes him seem older. His left leg drags slightly from an injury he received during the bombing of Munich. His eyes are pale gray, the kind that once might have held warmth, but now reflect a lifetime of caution. He wears the uniform of a janitor pushing a metal cart filled with supplies down corridors where men in uniforms debate the meaning of guilt and responsibility. Köhler knows these halls better than anyone. He knows which radiators clank in the evening, which doors stick in winter, which windows whistle on windy nights. And he knows something else. People are careless when they believe no one is watching. Tonight, after the last lawyers drift home and the echo of footsteps fades, Nuremberg's courthouse settles into a different kind of silence, a nervous quiet, the kind that amplifies every sound. Köhler begins his rounds on the upper floor where the prosecution offices are located. The Americans are meticulous during the day, but by night their desks hold scattered sheets, ink-stained blotter pads, half-finished memos. He moves through the rooms methodically, collecting trash, straightening furniture, checking windows. He reaches room 213, a legal office he has cleaned every night for months. The wastebasket is unusually full. He tips it over the cart's bin. Papers tumble out. Most are harmless: carbon copies, translation sheets, wrinkled memos. He is about to compress them with his gloved hand when a torn fragment slips free and slides across the floor. Köhler bends, picks it up, smooths it open with his thumb. The name hits him like an electric shock. Roland Freisler. For a moment, he wonders if he is imagining it. But no, the handwriting is unmistakable, sharp, angular, violent. Freisler, the notorious judge of the Volksgerichtshof, the People's Court. He died when an air raid hit Berlin in early 1945, but his legacy still clings like a shadow across Germany. His voice once echoed through courtrooms as he berated defendants and sentenced them to death with a shriek that made clerks flinch. What is Freisler's signature doing here? In Nuremberg? In the trash? Köhler unfolds the page fully. It's a partially burned directive concerning special treatment of political deviants and criminal offenders. He sees phrases that chill him: summary sentencing, expedited procedures, authorization for relocation. He knows what these words mean. Every German does, even if they never said it aloud. He flips the page. Another signature. Oswald Rothaug, one of the very judges now awaiting trial in this same building for perverting the justice system under the Nazi regime. Köhler feels a tightening in his chest. This is not random paperwork. This is evidence. He gathers the torn scraps from the bottom of the bin and begins gently flattening each one. The hour is late, but he is no longer tired. Something heavy has settled in his mind, a realization that the building he cleans holds secrets deeper than the filth he sweeps away. He slips the papers into a cloth bag normally used for rags. Then he continues working, though his hands shake slightly. He waits until early morning, when the first clerks arrive, and approaches one he recognizes as kind, a young American woman with auburn hair, always polite to him. She takes the pages from him with a puzzled smile. But when she sees the signatures, the color drains from her face. She looks around to be sure no one is watching, then tells him to wait. Minutes later, she returns with a senior legal officer who absorbs the situation in silence before ordering the papers locked away immediately. Culler stands there, unsure whether he has caused trouble or prevented it. Only later does he learn how close the evidence came to being lost forever, how crucial those scraps are, how they reveal that the Nazi judiciary did not simply bend to the regime, it helped design its cruelty. Within days, the Americans confirm the authenticity of the pages. They reconstruct the shredded sections, and they realize that what Culler found is not merely a footnote to history. It is the basis for a new indictment, a new trial, one that will expose the judges who turned law into a weapon. The judge's trial is born from a janitor's broom. But as this discovery ripples through the prosecution offices, another figure inside the Justizpalast prepares to make his own revelation, not by accident, not by duty, but by calculation. Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski waits alone in a cell lit by a single weak bulb. The walls seem to lean inward. Years earlier, he commanded SS units in brutal anti-partisan operations across the Eastern Front. His record is soaked in blood. Warsaw, Minsk, the mass killings in occupied territories. He knows the prosecutors could hang him a dozen times over. But he is not here as a defendant. Not yet. He is here because he possesses something the Americans want. Knowledge that can destroy Göring's carefully crafted defense. If he gives it, he might save his own neck. A guard unlocks the door. Two American interrogators step inside. Bach-Zelewski rises with stiff military formality, but his eyes reveal fatigue. It is the exhaustion of a man who has lived too long with what he has done. They sit. The first question is simple. Tell us what you know about the Einsatzgruppen. He could lie. Many have. But he doesn't. He begins to talk, slowly at first, then with a momentum that feels unstoppable. He describes how Himmler ordered the extermination of entire communities in the East, how officers competed in carrying out cleansing actions, how reports of killings, tens of thousands, were sent to Berlin with chilling efficiency. The interrogators write quickly, barely keeping pace. He speaks of meetings with Göring. The time Göring signed the directive allowing Reinhard Heydrich to coordinate the final solution of the Jewish question. The atmosphere in those rooms, formal, almost administrative, as if planning a logistics operation instead of mass murder. Every detail he offers tears another thread from Göring's defense, because Göring intends to portray himself as a statesman misled by subordinates. But Bach-Zelewski's words paint a different portrait, one of deliberate orchestration, shared intent, and cold precision. When he finishes, hours have passed. Sweat beads his brow despite the cold. His voice has grown hoarse. The interrogators close their notebooks, exchanging a look of stunned disbelief. They will call him as a witness, and when he steps into the courtroom, he knows his life will take a turn he cannot predict. Days later, the moment arrives. The courtroom swells with an energy that feels almost physical. Journalists shift in their seats. Spectators whisper. The defendants sit behind glass partitions, each isolated, yet all bound by the same shadow. Göring sits upright, polished, alert. His eyes scan the room. He loves the attention. He loves the stage. He thinks he can control this process the way he once controlled the Luftwaffe. Then Bach-Zelewski enters. The transformation in the room is immediate. Even the guards tighten their grips. Everyone knows who he is. They know what he commanded. They know what he represents. He sits. He raises his hand for the oath. He begins. His testimony slices through the courtroom with a precision that shocks even the judges. He speaks without theatrics, without hesitation, as if he has rehearsed these truths in his mind for months. Göring tries to maintain composure, but his jaw tightens. He glances toward the judges, then toward the prosecution table, then forward again, calculating, recalculating, searching for angles that no longer exist. Because this man, this SS commander, has decided to reveal everything. And now the courtroom sees Göring not as a man misled by events, but as a man who set them in motion. As Bach-Zelewski continues, Kuller's role in the trial seems almost microscopic. One man picking up scraps, another confessing to horrors, but together the two men create a picture far more devastating than the prosecution alone could paint. A picture showing that the Nazi system was not a chain pulled by one hand. It was a web connected by men who believed they were untouchable. The truth is coming out from the top and from the bottom, from the janitor sweeping the hall, and from the general confessing the atrocities. And the Justizpalast, for the first time since its construction, begins to feel like a place where justice might actually be possible. Jakob Kuller becomes known quietly among a few Americans as the janitor who saved the files. No announcement is made, no recognition is offered, nothing changes in his routine. He still pushes the same metal cart, still empties the same bins, still moves through the building without anyone turning their head. But something inside him has shifted. When he enters the courthouse each evening, he feels as if the walls themselves hum with hidden stories waiting to surface. The Americans never tell him the full significance of the documents he rescued, but he reads faces well. He sees the nervous energy among prosecutors as they pass him in the halls. He sees the locked doors that used to remain open, and he senses, with the intuition that comes from a lifetime of observing people without being noticed, that the trial has entered new territory. He feels it in the sudden seriousness of the guards posted outside the archive room, in the sharp looks exchanged between legal teams, in the tension that lingers long after the courtroom empties. He does not know that he has triggered a wave inside the prosecution, that the documents he found force them to reconsider the scope of guilt, that the Allies now face a broader question. If the regime's crimes were not limited to its generals, how deep did the rot go? While Kuller continues his nightly patrols, the Americans reconstruct the torn pages. Fragments from different bins fit together like shards of broken glass. What they uncover is a system where judges and lawyers twisted the law to justify brutality. They read orders granting Rothaug the power to impose death sentences for offenses as small as words spoken in frustration. They read Freisler's curt endorsements of policy changes that stripped away the last protections from those targeted by the regime. The prosecutors compare these scraps with captured archives. The pieces match, the language matches, the signatures match, and suddenly the legal foundation of Nazi Germany becomes clear. The judiciary was not merely complicit, it was active. It wrote its own tools for persecution. Behind closed doors, senior officials decide that a separate trial must be held, one that exposes the men who called themselves guardians of justice while condemning innocents to execution. And all of it traces back to a janitor who refused to throw away a signature he recognized. Meanwhile, in the cell block one floor below, Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski prepares for another round of questioning. The Americans have summoned him again. He senses their growing reliance on him, though he is careful not to voice it. He knows how fragile their trust is. He knows he is not speaking out of remorse. He is speaking out of survival. He sits on the edge of his cot, hands pressed together. His mind moves backward through time, through forests thick with smoke, through villages that no longer exist, through trenches dug to hold bodies, not soldiers. He sees the faces of men he commanded. He hears the orders he gave. He feels the weight of decisions that can never be undone. A guard's footsteps approach. The door opens. He stands and follows the escort to the interrogation room. The Americans waste no time. They ask him to clarify details about the chain of command within the SS. They ask about his meetings with Himmler, Heydrich, and Göring. They ask how the Einsatzgruppen coordinated with local authorities, with the Wehrmacht, with the civil administration. Bach-Zelewski answers calmly. He answers with precision. He answers with the detachment of a man describing a machine he once operated. He explains how the mass shootings unfolded, how units surrounded villages in the early hours, how men were separated from women and children, how firing squads rotated to prevent emotional breakdowns, how the reports were typed each evening and forwarded to Berlin with numbers listed like the output of a factory. He mentions the bodies falling into pits, the earth trembling beneath the weight. The Americans listen in stunned silence. One of the interrogators, a young officer who has seen only a few months of combat, clenches his pen so tightly that the plastic cracks. The other stares at the table, struggling to maintain composure. The truth, when spoken without emotion, becomes even more horrifying. When the session ends, the Americans walk out slowly, as though carrying something heavy between them. Bach-Zelewski remains seated for a long moment, feeling emptiness where fear should be. The fear will return later. It always does. In the days that follow, preparations for his testimony accelerate. The prosecution drafts questions designed to expose Göring's contradictions, to reveal the deliberate nature of the policies he denies. Every answer Bach-Zelewski has given them becomes a weapon. Word spreads that the SS general will testify soon. The defendants hear the rumors. Göring hears them too. He maintains confidence outwardly, but inside he knows the risk. He knows that Bach-Zelewski was present at meetings he cannot refute. He knows that the general's testimony can unravel the narrative he has spent weeks constructing. Göring has tried to charm the courtroom. He has turned questions into opportunities. He has sparred with the prosecution and entertained journalists. But now he faces a witness whose words carry the weight of direct involvement. The day arrives. The courtroom fills earlier than usual. Observers sense that something important is about to happen. The journalists take their seats. Translators test their headsets. Guards adjust their positions along the walls. In the back, Köhler stands near the exit with a broom and dustpan, pretending to sweep while observing the room he rarely sees filled. The defendants enter. Göring adjusts his uniform jacket, his expression composed. He sits with the posture of a man accustomed to authority, but his eyes move constantly, scanning the room. Then the doors open again. Bach-Zelewski enters under heavy guard. His steps are steady, but his face shows the strain of what he is about to do. He walks past the defendants without looking at them. Yet he feels the weight of Göring's stare on his back. He sits. The oath is administered. The room falls into a silence so complete that even small sounds seem loud. The prosecutor begins with background, his rank, his positions, his responsibilities. Bach-Zelewski answers without hesitation. His voice is steady, carrying across the chamber with a clarity that makes translators lean closer to their microphones. Then come the questions about the Eastern Front. He describes the orders to eliminate entire groups. He recounts directives from Himmler that left no room for mercy. He details the process of coordinating with security police and civilian administrators. He explains how the killings were reported up the chain, how the figures were compiled, how Berlin received them. The judges listen intently. The stenographers struggle to capture every word. The journalists exchange glances that reveal horror even they cannot conceal. Then the prosecutor shifts to the central point. Did Hermann Göring play a role in authorizing these actions? The room becomes still. Bach-Zelewski lowers his eyes for a brief moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he looks up and speaks with a firmness that echoes through the hall. Yes, he did. He explains how Göring signed the order empowering Heydrich to prepare what became known as the final solution. He references the date, the directive, the minutes from the meeting. He describes Göring's expressions, the formal language he used, the unmistakable intent behind the authorization. Göring's face tightens. He leans forward slightly, as if willing the witness to falter. But Bach-Zelewski does not falter. He continues, describing Göring's ongoing involvement, his knowledge of the operations, his presence at discussions that guided policy. With each statement, Göring's defense collapses piece by piece. The judges watch him carefully. They note his reaction to the testimony, and they see, perhaps for the first time, the limits of his confidence. By the time the session ends, the room feels changed. Reporters rush to their desks. Prosecutors exchange hurried whispers. Even the guards appear shaken. Köhler, standing near the back, sees something few others notice. He sees Göring remain seated for several seconds after the defendants are told to rise. He sees a flash of something raw in the man's eyes, fear or anger, or perhaps recognition that the performance he intended to stage is over. As the courtroom empties, Köhler returns to his duties. He sweeps the aisles, gathers discarded notes, cleans the railings. The building feels different again, as if a layer of its past has been peeled back. Later that night, while the corridors are empty, Köhler wonders about the nature of truth. It can come from a man who has spent his life obeying unjust orders. It can come from a janitor who never held power. It can come from the scraps of paper people try to hide. And once spoken, it becomes something unstoppable. He does not know that the Americans are now formalizing plans for the judge's trial. He does not know that Bach-Zelewski's testimony will haunt Göring in his final weeks. But he senses the shift, and he continues pushing his cart down the long, dimly lit corridors, feeling as if he has become part of something larger than any single person in the building. Far above him, in offices where the lights burn late into the night, prosecutors pore over the pages he found. They build a case against the men who once pronounced guilt with a pen stroke. They construct arguments that expose ideological corruption disguised as law. And in the cells below, Bach-Zelewski lies awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing he has crossed a line he can never return from. He has told the truth about his superiors. He has broken the silence expected of an SS commander, and he wonders what awaits him. The Justizpalast holds all of them now: janitor, general, judge, prosecutor, each caught in the slow movement of justice that feels heavier than any trial before it. But not everything inside the building is revealed yet. Secrets still move through the hallways like shadows, and some of the most dangerous ones are hidden where almost no one thinks to look. As winter deepens over Nuremberg, the courthouse becomes a world unto itself. Days shrink into narrow windows of pale light. Nights stretch long across the city, swallowing the ruins in silence. Inside, the Justizpalast remains brightly lit, an island of order in a landscape still recovering from collapse. The staff, the guards, the translators, they develop routines, small rituals that keep the weight of the trials from consuming them. But beneath those routines flows something darker. The building holds people who were once the architects of an empire, men who treated entire populations as obstacles, men accustomed to bending the world to their will. Some of them now sit behind glass each day, others wait in their cells below ground, and a few still try to manipulate the environment around them, believing they can shape the outcome. It is during one of Köller's evening rounds that he notices a peculiar detail. It seems trivial at first. A second wastebasket inside a clerk's office is filled with ashes, as if someone burned documents inside it. He lifts the bin, taps out the ash into his cart, and stares at the faint outlines of charred paper. He cannot read the words, they are too damaged, but he recognizes enough: an official letterhead, a faint stamp from the Reich Ministry of Justice, signatures disfigured by flame. Someone tried to destroy something again. This time, the Americans notice quickly. An officer scolds the clerk responsible for allowing unsupervised access. Köller watches silently from the hall as the officer confiscates the bin. He has no proof of what was burned, but the pattern unsettles him. People hope that trash fades into nothing, but the building remembers. And often, the flames reveal the desperation of those who know that certain truths cannot survive scrutiny. Meanwhile, the prosecutors follow new leads. As they assemble materials for the judge's trial, they uncover memos from Rothaug's sessions in Nuremberg and Breslau. They read how defendants were denied counsel, how evidence was manipulated, how death sentences were predetermined before trials began. They discover that the courtrooms of Nazi Germany were not institutions of justice. They were instruments of terror. These revelations begin forming a picture of a regime rooted not only in violence, but in legal perversion. The defendants on the high tribunal share responsibility, but the judiciary's complicity now stands exposed. And it all began because a janitor lifted a torn page from the floor. As all this unfolds, Bach-Zelewski continues to struggle with his own past. He has given the prosecutors enough to destroy Göring's narrative. But he knows that those who hear his testimony will never forget it. Even he cannot forget the things he described. The interrogations leave him drained, his nerves stretched thin. Nights in his cell become long confrontations with memory. He lies on his cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to guards shift outside. He closes his eyes, but the darkness brings back scenes from years earlier. A burning village in Belarus, a line of people walking toward pits they dug themselves, commanders giving orders with quiet efficiency. He reopens his eyes quickly, as if waking from a nightmare. But he knows he was not asleep. Still, he also knows that speaking the truth has given him something unfamiliar, a path away from certain death, a slim one, but real. And for the first time, he wonders if there is a difference between survival and redemption, even if he does not deserve the latter. Göring feels the consequences of the testimony almost immediately. The press shifts its tone. The public, which had been captivated by his theatrical defiance, grows colder. Journalists begin portraying him as a man losing control of his narrative. Even the judges appear less receptive to his attempts at charm or wit. In private moments, Göring fumes. He complains loudly to the guards about the treachery inside the SS ranks. He speaks bitterly of collaborators and cowards. But beneath his anger is a recognition of something deeper. For the first time in his life, he cannot direct the course of events around him. The stage he believed he controlled is slipping beyond reach. The prosecutors, sensing this shift, begin tightening their strategy. They prepare to confront Göring with Bach-Zelewski's statements. They highlight contradictions in his testimony. They gather documents, minutes, memos, signatures, to corner him with the precision of the very legal system he once believed he commanded. The judge's trial begins shortly after. It takes place in a smaller chamber, away from the main trial. Köhler is assigned to clean that courtroom as well. He listens to the names of the accused, Rothaug, Altstädter, Ursche. Men who once delivered rulings with the authority of the state now stand stiffly before judges from the nation they once despised. Prosecutors submit evidence showing how the law became a weapon of persecution. They read directives Köhler helped preserve, detailing how judges coordinated with SS officials to carry out ideological policies. They present testimonies from victims who barely escaped the machinery of the People's Court. Köhler, sweeping the aisles after each session, hears enough to understand that justice is not simply punishing the powerful. Sometimes it means exposing the rot that lived beneath the surface, rot that was not always loud or visible, but was deadly all the same. The courthouse becomes a mosaic of trials, each one revealing another layer of the regime's corruption. Some defendants shout, some remain silent, some weep, some deny everything, but none of them walk through the corridors the way they once did. And in the background, Köhler continues his nightly work. His presence becomes familiar to the Americans. They greet him with nods, sometimes with quiet thanks. But he remains overlooked by most, just as he prefers, a man who sees everything because no one pays attention to him. One evening, as he passes the corridor leading to the defendant's cells, he hears a voice raised in anger. It is Göring. He is arguing with a guard, insisting he is being mistreated. The guard responds bluntly, telling him that after what he has heard in the courtroom, he has no patience for complaints. Köhler pauses. He does not know if he should continue. but the moment holds him there. He hears Göring's voice shift, no longer commanding, no longer dramatic, just tired, almost defeated. Then Köller moves on. His cart rattles softly across the stone floor. Weeks pass. The trials advance. The evidence accumulates. Prosecutors craft their closing arguments. Judges deliberate. And outside, Nuremberg slowly rebuilds, though much of the city remains scarred. On the morning the verdicts are announced, the courthouse is crowded long before dawn. Spectators press against the walls. Journalists fill their notebooks with speculation. Guards maintain rigid order. Göring receives a sentence of death by hanging. Rothaug receives the same. Several others face long prison terms. Some are acquitted, though even they leave under the weight of disgrace. But the moment that stands out in the building is not the sentence itself. It is the stillness that follows, the realization that the legal foundation of a brutal regime has finally been held accountable. That lies spoken for years have been stripped away by truth spoken at last, by a general who confessed and a janitor who refused to ignore what he found. Göring takes his sentence with outward calm. He nods as if the decision confirms what he expected. But in the days that follow, he becomes increasingly quiet in his cell. He requests meetings that do not occur. He makes statements that no longer hold the attention they once did. Then, the night before the executions, he cheats the noose. A guard discovers him dead in his cell, a capsule of cyanide crushed between his teeth. The Americans investigate furiously. They interrogate guards, search belongings, review procedures. But the source of the poison remains uncertain. Some say it was smuggled in by a guard sympathetic to him. Some say Göring hid it for months. Some say he manipulated someone into passing it to him. The truth never fully emerges. In the morning, the remaining condemned are executed as ordered. The sound of their final steps echoes faintly through the halls. Köller is not present for this. He is sweeping a distant staircase, unaware of the events unfolding. He hears whispers later in the day, rumors, shock. He finishes his shift quietly. In the months that follow, the trials wind down. The courthouse becomes quieter. Journalists leave for other assignments. Guards rotate out. Clerks are reassigned. The defendant's wing empties. But the building remains, and so does Köller. Spring arrives. One evening, the courthouse windows glow in the fading light as he pushes his cart through the corridor outside the main chamber. The air smells faintly of tobacco and old paper. He pauses, gazing at the room where so much unfolded. He thinks of the burned scraps he found, the torn signatures, the evidence saved by chance and caution. He thinks of the SS general whose testimony changed the course of the trial. He thinks of the judges who once wielded the law like a hammer, now reduced to defendants. He thinks of the people whose stories will never be told, the ones who did not survive to see justice or its imperfect echo. Then he returns to his work. He sweeps the last of the dust from the courtroom floor, gathers the remnants of the day, and pushes the cart down the long hallway, disappearing into the quiet that settles over Nuremberg at night. And as he moves, the truth becomes clear. Justice is rarely carried by the powerful alone. Its path is shaped by ordinary people who notice the small things, by confessions whispered in dim rooms, by scraps of paper lifted from the floor, by the courage to speak and the courage to listen. History remembers Göring's rage, Bach-Zelewski's testimony, Rothaug's arrogance. But in the building where justice finally confronted a regime built on lies, an old janitor leaves the smallest footprint and the largest impact. The trials end. The sentences are carried out. Germany begins to rebuild. And the man who exposed the hidden corner of a monstrous system takes off his work gloves, sets his broom aside, and walks home through a city still healing. He leaves behind no speeches, no memoirs, no public recognition, only a truth that would have vanished without him.